Welcome, everybody. Thank you all for being here. We, of course, are watching you on Restream. We're going to we have a Twitter Spaces set up from which we will take some calls, hopefully. Today, Paulina Pinsky joins us. Last time she was here, she was in at about 3 or 4 months of sobriety, and she wanted to come back and share her growth and perspectives now that she's 16 months or so out into her sobriety. So we will get her thoughts on that. We get your calls, and she'll be with me about 30 to 40 minutes. And then I want to lay out my thoughts and changes in my thinking as it pertains to the lab leak hypothesis and what to look for, and and moreover, how we all need to keep an open mind as it goes to every topic, and talk a little bit about how people are either angry and aggressive and projecting, or they're withdrawing and becoming sort of siloed and angry and paranoid, and how we have to all fight against all those things. So I'll be right back after this.
Our laws, as it pertains to substances, are draconian and bizarre. The psychopaths start this way. He was an alcoholic because of social media and pornography, PTSD, love addiction, fentanyl and heroin. Ridiculous. I'm a doctor, for sake. Where the hell do you think I learned that? I'm just saying, you go to treatment before you kill people. I am a clinician. I observe things about these chemicals. Let's just deal with what's real. We used to get these calls on Loveline all the time. Educate adolescents and to prevent and to treat. If you have trouble you can't stop and you want to help stop it, I can help. I got a lot to say. I got a lot more to say.
And let's get right into it. Welcome, Paulina Pinsky.
Hello.
Hello there.
Hello.
Hang on. Let's bring her on in. There we are.
Oh!
There we are.
Wow.
Welcome. So do you want to give your thoughts on what brought you back? Or I've got Kevin Sabet on hold here over at the Twitter Spaces. He'll be a very interesting resource for you to talk to.
Yeah.
But should we get your thoughts first? You want to go straight out to Kevin?
Well, I just want to course correct. I do not have 16 months. I have like 14. I don't want to say I have more time than I do. So 441
December,
days.
January, February, March.
Wait, am I doing my math wrong?
Oh, no, it was the end of December. I counted December as a whole month. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, but I'm open to talk to anybody. I don't have an agenda other than to be like, hi, hello. It's been a long time since I last saw you. And I look back on that live stream from, when I was like maybe 90 days sober, which is only 3 months in, and how different everything feels from then. And sort of, I think as an artist and a writer, I'm committed to changing in public. And I think I wanted the opportunity to be like, a year can make a difference. It makes a huge difference. And so I'm just here to, I don't know, do whatever you want to talk to me about kind of
Let's
thing.
explain what your addiction was.
I was very, very addicted to marijuana. I'm sorry to tell you, weed is addictive. When I was on the live stream last, that felt like a very dangerous thing to say because it gets so much pushback. And from where I'm standing, I think a lot of the rhetoric used to legalize marijuana is backfiring, so much so that people believe that it's not addictive, that it's only medicine. And I will tell people, I was addicted to marijuana, and they'll look at me and be like, but it's not addictive. And I think, a lot of the rhetoric used to legalize is backfiring. I think we should be thinking about marijuana like we think about big tobacco, and the narratives that were being sold aren't necessarily the truth. But I couldn't get past 11 a.m. without smoking. I had cannabinoids hyperemesis, where I was ingesting so much weed that I was vomiting every day. And, in the larger culture, we don't hear about marijuana addiction. I think mostly because it is seen as this panacea and it's a spiritual tool and all these things, which it very much can be, but also it feels like there isn't a spectrum of conversation there. And I think for a lot of people, it brings up feelings of anger because we have been told it is all these things, but also because when we hear that it's addictive, it makes us think about our own behaviors. And so I'm not here to say that you're addicted to marijuana. I'm here to say that I was addicted to marijuana and that my life is so much better now that I am completely abstinent from any drugs and alcohol. And that's because I have the gene. And I'm just here to say that, if you're suffering, if you're experiencing depression and anxiety and you're smoking weed all the time, it's probably the weed.
You also mentioned last time, which was actually, you educated me a little bit about the fact that if you're doing dabs, if you're bringing a blowtorch out, it's time to start to look into things.
You're taking weed to a very methy degree. I would say, for those of us who are not familiar with dabs, weed can come in flower and tinctures. Dabs are highly concentrated oils. So, a joint in the 60s was like 0.5% THC. And for this is all from my understanding, and I'm open to having conversation and learning more. But again, it's hard to find information that is counter to the larger narrative that is like weed is medicine and it is a creative tool and all these things. But now a THC joint or edible, I mean, in California, a lot of them start at 5 milligrams THC, but a joint can go anywhere from 12% to 80%. And dabs are in that 80% category. And so I think a lot of us who use dabs or are currently using dab is because our tolerance is so high that we don't get high smoking joints anymore. And so it's actually more cost effective to use dabs. But that being said, I had extreme esophagitis. I was vomiting every day. I was, the first time I did a dab, I felt my soul leave my body, and then I projectile vomited onto the couch and the dog and then shook in the bathtub for 3 hours.
And you never thought maybe there's association between these dabs and the vomiting? Maybe?
Of course not, because no one was asking me that question. Right. And it's like, oh, it's my history of eating disorder, or, I'm coughing so hard, but it's like, is it the bong rip? But when you're in it, you can't really see yourself as clearly as you think you can. And so now that, I have 441 days without ingesting any mind altering substances, I can see the way in which my addiction is, a self-perception disease, in that, I couldn't get past 11 a.m. without smoking. I'd be like, oh, I need to write. I need to smoke. If I smoke, I will write. But if I smoke, then I won't write. And so it was just like this weird tangle, and inevitably I'd smoke and I wouldn't write. And now, I don't smoke at all and I write all day long, whether it's morning pages, night journals, essays. I think a lot of us think about marijuana as a creativity inducing tool. And I'm here to say that you are inherently creative and you don't need to outsource your creativity, even though it may feel that way, which is why I lead people through the Artist Way, which is a 12-week spiritual program, workbook written by Julia Cameron, meant to unblock creativity. And I think, a lot of the things that we outsource to are actually inhibiting us more than we think.
For sure. And that is one of the things I see frequently with cannabis. It does, people think they're enhanced, but they're often just, their knees are knocked out. It's like they can't move forward.
Yeah,
it's very crazy.
I think how it feels is not how people perceive you.
Yeah.
And I think, even though you may feel more comfortable, say, smoking before going to a party and you feel settled, people feel that you leave the room, that you're not as present as you think you are, that maybe—
And people get rigid and irritable too with it, the kind of strange ways.
Yeah, and it's only because I was so dedicated to being a stoner that I can see the way in which the self-deception keeps you from being as fully present as you think you are. And that also that marijuana is also making you more anxious.
That happens over time too, and more depressed.
Yeah.
Well, let's bring Kevin Sabet in, shall we?
Yeah.
Kevin is I don't know what his official title is, but he's the leader at Smart Approaches to Marijuana. And he and I have known each other for a long time. I should have notified him about this stream, and thankfully he noticed it, and I appreciate him being here. Kevin, we're not going to have this connecting process. I'm sorry for the little glitch and the delay.
It's a delay.
It's okay.
And then, Kevin, are you there? And okay, you got to unmute yourself, the mic in the lower left-hand corner, and then we're good. There you are.
Hey, now you can hear me. Hi.
Hi, Kevin.
Well, this is Hi, Drew. How are you? Good to hear your voice. And Paulina, what an inspirational story. This is so fortuitous, guys, because I wish I could tell you I planned on being on this, and it would have been the highlight of my week if I planned on it, but I didn't. Literally just walked off the set of Dr. Phil. We just did a show on psychedelics.
Wow.
And just kind of the hype. That's the new.
Yeah, I got a lot of experience with that.
Yeah. Well, the new marijuana being touted as the magic thing. So, but the funny thing is, I'm on a plane, so I may have to go at any minute if we take off. But I literally just came to listen. And Paulina, you just were telling your story, and everything you were saying, it's like, you need to be the next head of Smart Approaches to Marijuana here with me and Patrick Kennedy, because everything you're saying is completely right. and it just rings true. And
thank you.
I just want to congratulate you for the courage to speak on this. It's like we're like talking about cigarettes in the 1970s when we're starting to get the research, and yet no one's listening still.
Yeah.
That's what it's like with marijuana. And I actually did not intend to come on when I requested to speak. I hadn't even, you hadn't even shared your story yet. And I was going to talk about the psychedelics thing, but then you're talking about marijuana. So it's just very fortuitous. But I just want to thank you. And, our organization is Sam. Drew has been so generous and helpful with it over the last 10 years now. It's learnaboutsam.org, bipartisan, co-founded with Patrick Kennedy. We have all the major researchers on our board. I mean, the science is pretty settled on this. It's not like up in the air whether or not marijuana can be, not always, can be addictive or can induce psychosis. I mean, that's pretty settled. 8-point loss in IQ, cardiovascular issues are emerging, big issues there. But the public is just hearing from really the for-profit companies that want to be the next big tobacco and make all that money. And so a voice like yours, I can't tell you how needed it is. And I want to thank you for that, following right in the footsteps of Drew. So thank you guys so much.
And Kevin, you would appreciate also, I was, maybe she'd been about 6 months sober. I don't remember if you asked me about Tell Your Children by
Alex Berenson.
Berenson.
Alex,
or I gave it to you or was sitting around or something, and you read it. You're like, why did you show this to me? Why? I was like, dude, you were not ready.
I wasn't ready.
I'm sure I did. You would not have done anything with this.
Right. And I'll tell you, I got a call yesterday from, and I'll keep anonymity, obviously, but the CEO of a major mental health organization. Okay, I won't say which one. There's a few of them. This person's daughter, 16 years old, addicted to marijuana since age 12. When she stops using it, she literally, after one day, if she stops using it, she just vomits for 3 days. So if she's off one day, she's vomiting 3 days. And she's in the throes, as we speak, of a cannabis-induced psychosis. And the mom doesn't know what to do. I mean, they're stabilizing her on lithium a little bit, but and this is someone who, has like people at her, dialed, at her favorites on her phone that she could, congressmen and senators. Yet we're not taking this issue as serious as we should, and we're all paying the price as a country for it.
Yeah, do me a favor. I mean, refer her to Paulina's writings and stuff. I mean, it's very good resource.
I wrote a.
I can't wait to read more about it, Paulina. I didn't, to be honest, I didn't know much about it, so now I'm very excited to read about it.
Thank you. It is incredibly difficult to, be honest about this. And I think I've received a lot of pushback. And at the end of the day, I know what I experienced. And
I'll give you an open invite right now. And I don't know if, I'm going to put you on the spot and you can look at your calendar. But on 4/20, which of course is like the stoner holiday, April 20th, we're having I mean, it's not huge, but a couple hundred, our conference in D.C. We're going to have some senators and members of Congress there and advocates and people who have stories. And unfortunately, a lot of parents whose kids, have not good stories, but your story of hope, we'd love to hear it, whether in person or on video in DC with some members of Congress. Open invite anytime.
My answer is yes.
April 20th.
I'm here. I'm there.
All right.
Yeah.
My staff's going to kill me for adding another person to the agenda, but this is worth it. So we're going to do it.
She tells a good story too. So
that's what I want to hear. No, I think that's going to be great. And unfortunately, they're giving me evil eyes. We're like on the tarmac. So, so I can't stay on. But I'm going to listen to this afterwards. And again, you guys are the best.
One last thing. Well, is Alex going to be at the conference?
I don't think he is, because he's talking a little bit less about cannabis these days, more about obviously the COVID issue. He speaks a little bit on it. I've known him for a number of years. He interviewed me for his book, and we're actually proudly the one organization that he lists in the book as a resource that on this. So that's been great. He's very courageous on this issue to speak out. But we are going to have a bunch of scientists, people in the field, advocates, and Paulina, we'd love to have you.
Is your number still a 484 number?
It is. That's me still. Yes.
Okay. Ends in a 2.
Please. Yes, it does.
Okay. Yes. All right. I'll give that to Paulina.
Yes.
Okay.
So I'll be in contact.
All right, guys. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Can't wait.
Good luck.
Thank you.
All right. I'm going to send that to you right now.
Wow.
So see how these things, it's extraordinary how these things happen, isn't it?
I mean,
that's what you call the God shots, miracle of recovery, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Synchronicity, baby.
But it happens all the time in recovery, doesn't it?
It does. And I think, because I'm sober, I'm open to these things, that I can hear him and actually receive what he's saying to me. And also follow up on the opportunity. So I will be contacting him. Absolutely.
It sounds really interesting.
Yeah, I just, I think there's a lot of imposter syndrome when it comes to marijuana addiction. Like sometimes, and I've said this before, and this isn't like a logical thing, but sometimes I wish that I had a meth problem, because then people wouldn't look at me and be like, meth is medicine. I think there's a lot of belittling that goes along. And then there's like, well, I was able to stop. And it's like, congratulations. I'm so happy for you. I could not.
Yeah.
So that's incredible. Like, it still blows my hair back when people validate
Yeah.
what I experienced.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm hoping people that are raising their hand are still on this topic. So to make sure of that, let's just make sure we've covered the territory you wanted to cover before we go to the callers.
I didn't really have a specific agenda. I just wanted to show face and be like, hey, the first year is really hard. THC is in your system for the first 6 months. I had to take like 3 naps a day in order to get through the day. I think this is you don't understand when you are using how much you are altering your brain chemistry. And I think also speaking about weed-induced psychosis, in this last year, I've witnessed 3 people go into weed-induced psychosis alone. I myself had a hypomanic episode, 2018. And I think so much of using is not recognizing when you are kind of departing from reality, because that is the point. But also I think, there's so much to be said about what this substance can do, right? I like how he phrased it, that it can be addictive, right? I know for full fact that I am wholly addicted to marijuana, and that means that I have to be wholly abstinent. And I'm just here to say that, and it isn't to be like, sobriety machine, my life is better and I've never felt pain again. Like, I suffer, we all suffer. That is life. Coming out of the pandemic, we're all operating with a loneliness deficit. We're all still recovering from that. We're all dealing with, virtual reality and what it means to perform virtually. And then also feeling this like depth of loneliness where we're trying to connect with people, but everybody is kind of like freaked out because we're so deficient in a certain way. And all of this is to say that it has been such a gift in order to be fully present for my life, because so much of my life that I was trying to escape was changeable. And so in order to take change and make action in my life that ended up serving me but was painful, the worst thing that ever happened did happen, and you know what, I'm alive and I'm so much happier because of it.
And you took your sobriety very seriously, and you've done a mutual aid society on a daily basis.
Absolutely.
I don't think you've missed a day since day one.
No, I go every day.
Yeah. And so people, maybe we'll talk a little bit about that, because as you said, some people do stop cannabis on their own,
which is incredible.
Yeah.
But that was not me.
But you would have missed something had you not done all this work.
I think, there is a spiritual element for me, and part of that has to do with going to a daily recovery meeting and being immersed in an in-person community. And I think so much of addiction, the opposite of addiction is connection. And so our disease, which I frame my addiction and alcoholism, you put a substance in front of me, I'm going to overdo it. I always have from the start. My nickname in college was Barfalina for a reason, because I would either black out or vomit. And that's, I think when I first got sober, I didn't remember that for 4 months, right? And so because I had this community where I was showing up every day, where people were getting to know me because I was making relationships and talking to people, I was able to have deeper insight and also connection with other people, which inevitably, I think, I've always been like, my mom brought clairvoyance to the house when I was a kid, and they'd say dead people were in the room. Like, that was like sort of the extent of spirituality in our household. I don't have religious trauma. And so going into these spiritual programs, I really came to it really quickly, just because I think I've always been a spiritual person, but I don't have a religious dogmatic framework. But I think there's something really important about the spiritual aspect and the spiritual development of recovery. That has been really, really helpful in terms of, just my entire life. And, I really believe that anything you put above your sobriety, you're going to lose. And so I go to meetings every day and I write gratitude lists, and there's all these little things that I do that inevitably shift my mindset and help me show up in my life more fully, because I put my sobriety first.
Yeah. These stories about denial always crack me up, because I have staff members I used to work with who would tell stories about things they realized they had done in their disease like 4 years later.
Yeah.
And it was always usually around the stories were usually around denial. Like, I think I told you the story once, a guy who was a counselor at my unit who would come home raging drunk every night, and his wife would, like, in the morning just go, what do you get, sort of rail on him. And one morning he came down the stairs and there was a tape recorder. In old days, they had these tape recorders, these cassette tape recorders with play buttons, sort of like piano keys. And she goes, "You need to listen to this." And she pushed the play button, and she said what he heard was this raving maniac, and it sounded like him. And his reaction was to become enraged that his wife hired an actor to make him believe he behaved like that when he came home at night. And he didn't realize that till he'd been sober about 4 years. And he thought, "Ooh, note."
Yeah, I mean, it's constantly, every day is a revelation, and it can be tiny things and it can be huge things. Like right now, I'm really grappling with my perfectionistic thinking, and I'm like, oh, this is why I smoked weed every day, because this sucks. Like, it sucks to like want to do everything so perfectly that you can't even start. Or when you show up imperfectly, you're berating yourself for hours and hours and hours. And I remember being a teenager and like being in the height of my eating disorder and understanding that like this is a thinking problem. This is how my brain operates, and that inevitably drinking and smoking were solutions to that.
Right.
But they weren't long-term solutions.
Sometimes it's just that they feel good. I mean, that people do drugs just because they feel good.
Yeah.
But often it's to feel better. Typically, it is to feel better. And so it does, if it didn't work, you wouldn't do it. Right.
Yeah.
And
the
addiction comes next.
Yeah. And I had to kind of think about, when it stopped working and I couldn't stop, that was when I was like, whoa, something's wrong here. It doesn't feel any good anymore.
That's the deal. That's where it kicks in. That's the real thing.
Yeah.
All right. Let's keep taking a couple calls here. One last thing before I go to the caller, and I've got Jenny Fur in a second. What did you want people to know about how you were at 4 months versus 15 months?
I think when I look back on that video, there's something very fragile about me and very like live wire raw. And also I think I was regurgitating a lot of program that I was hearing. And now, I have an understanding of that informs my sobriety.
Were you afraid that people were going to attack you for daring to say you were addicted to cannabis?
Oh yeah. I mean, the fact that I got pushback for that was so dangerous because it was such a hard thing to even admit out loud. And at that point, I didn't even understand weed-induced psychosis. It wasn't until 9 months in that I understood that I had witnessed weed-induced psychosis multiple times. And so, I think when we hear the word psychosis, we think about schizophrenia. And so we think like a Jesus complex and like wanting to murder people, which weed-induced psychosis can do. But often for me, it's, it's talking. It's more
subtle.
It's more subtle. It's more like, you're not listening, as they like rant at you for 3 hours. And you're like, where is the narrative thread here? And so I think it's like the lack of self-perception and also the inability to sit and listen.
It is interesting how "you're not listening" is a very characteristic phrase that people in that state will say.
It's happened with each person.
Yeah.
It's so strange.
Yeah.
And I really pride myself on being someone who really works at being a good listener. And so sitting there and trying to be like, I am listening, I just can't figure out what the hell you're saying.
And not to say that occasionally we don't listen and people are right when they say we aren't listening. That's also happens.
Yeah, you can call me out. Yeah.
Let's take this speaker. This is Jenny Fur. Jenny. Hey, Jenny.
Hi, Dr. Drew. Hi, Paulina.
Hello.
Thanks for having me up. Two things. Dr. Drew, I just want to say the other day I was listening to Defending Yourself. And I caught the very end of it, and I thought you did an amazing job at like talking down those people who were honestly going off the rails on you.
Well, thank you. The thing when I look back on it, and by the way, I learned a couple things, and that's why I talk to people. I like to learn stuff, but I'm going to talk about that in about 20 minutes. But demanding somebody, with the thing that I'm offended by and troubled by was people were demanding my speech. Like, you have to say the following. That is disgusting behavior. But there you are. So,
no, I totally agree. And free speech, right?
You mandating other people to say what you want them to say, that should not be on anybody's lips. Anybody.
I live in Canada, and I have to say, Peterson's dealing with the same thing here. It's terrible.
Wild.
But Paulina and Drew, what I wanted to mention was, when I was 36, I had a terrible experience with marijuana. I'd smoked on and off recreationally since I was probably about 21. So not in high school or anything like that, but they're just, I don't know if it was the strain or what it was, but like literally there was red lines up and down my arms and on my chest. And my friend at the time was like, I don't understand what's happening to you. She's like, do you think we should go to the hospital? And I was like, well, let's just wait and see what happens. But after that, I was like, you know, I did the whole, okay, God, if you let me get through this, I'll never smoke it again.
What were your other, were you having as you look back, did you have a dry mouth?
I did.
Did you have sort of difficulty with lights, like photophobia?
You know, that was so long ago. I don't know if that was happening or not.
Were you sort of agitated, like not scared, but kind of agitated, like pacing around, that kind of thing?
Yes, pacing.
Okay, so that's called an anticholinergic delirium. And that is being seen more and more and more frequently from cannabis, particularly in older people. The ER visits are way up for anticholinergic delirium. It used to be something we saw just from certain medications. I remember it was quinines, and sometimes people overdose on Benadryl, things like that. But we're now seeing it from cannabis, mostly in older people, but it's the strength of it. It's just so powerful now that people are having these huge reactions. So you might have had yourself an anticholinergic delirium.
You're going to need to spell that out for me.
Okay. Okay.
I also want to congratulate you, Paulina, on your sobriety. My daughter went through, actually, I have a 27-year-old daughter, and 2 years ago, she was doing dabs on the regular, and, you know, the puking, same thing that you had. And she did a cold turkey. She didn't have any support other than me. I think I mentioned this actually on another show, that, you know, I was her lifeline 24/7 for a couple of months. She had insomnia and just, it was hard to watch.
It's brutal.
It's super brutal. Yeah. Well, congratulations to your daughter as well. That's a big deal.
Exactly. Thanks, Jenny.
Thank you.
You bet. Yeah. I mean, when you really start talking about it, of course, other people have these experiences, but it's much like being vaccine injured. People are afraid to talk about it because you get judged and marginalized, all this stuff. Yeah. And look, there are things that happen, and we should just be honest about what happens. And it doesn't happen to everybody. It doesn't mean. Here's the thing that bothers me. I think I've discussed this with you before, because humans in their relationship with a chemical have a clinical syndrome. It doesn't mean the chemical is bad or evil. Yeah. It doesn't mean anything about the chemical, in fact. And so so we just need to look at that relationship and what happens when the human gets involved with it.
I think that's so interesting because I think, you know, when I say it, people hear me saying marijuana is evil. Like, I loved marijuana clearly, you know, like I loved it, and
By the way,
did it.
Loving it is a sign.
Yeah, I might have a problem.
No, because people that don't get addicted don't love it.
Yeah, no, it's true.
That's a certain biology.
It's true. And so I think a lot about, you know, if someone said, you know, alcohol is my medicine, you'd be like, you're an alcoholic, you know, like there's understanding that alcohol is a mind-altering substance, and that overuse of it can produce a negative effect. Whereas I think, again, we're thinking about marijuana in terms of big tobacco, you know, the rhetoric used to legalize is backfiring. So much so that when you think, oh, this is medicine, oh, this is helping my anxiety, oh, this is helping me be creative, you are regurgitating rhetoric that you have heard. That maybe in the beginning it is that way, but when you overuse it, it doesn't always stay that way.
And by the way, non-addicts, it might stay that way.
Yeah, God bless you.
Yeah.
That's not me.
Yeah.
I got the gene, baby.
Yeah.
One is not enough. I have to have it all.
Let's see what.
Sing it.
Nasser, is that you? We'll give him a chance.
I know where she gets it.
You. I'm not pointing your finger.
Nasser, you wanted to give it. Whoop. Yeah, unmute yourself. Different point of view there. We're having trouble getting him up, as I often do. There we are. Nasser.
Hey, doctor, can I speak?
Yes, of course.
Yeah, so the topic of the space actually attracted me, and I decided to come here and spill my own beans. May I?
Okay, of course.
Okay, I'm sitting on a lot of lithium deposit, and I don't know what to do with it.
I'm sorry, couldn't quite catch you. On
lithium, what they use in making electric cars.
Okay.
Yeah, I've got tons of rocks of it, and I don't know who to sell it to. Please, can you point me in the right direction?
I think
Elon Musk.
Yeah.
he came. Okay, I can tell you what happened with Elon Musk and my government. He came, but he wanted to crash the price of lithium, and I think that's what canceled the deal between the two of them. So I'm going my own way now. I can't stick with the government,
Good for you. This all sounds very exciting.
It's an
right?
entrepreneurial spirit.
Yeah, and it also it could maybe solving a real, adding to helping it solve a serious
Well,
problem.
you know what's actually kind of interesting? This is kind of like an example of like medical marijuana versus like black market marijuana. Like you can have, the government mandated marijuana, but there's always going to be a black market.
Right.
Well,
a little different. I think he really just wants to have a legitimate source.
Well, I do want you to have a legitimate source. I'm just saying that there's always a demand.
I'm gonna. Do you want to put out your like website or something so people can go there if they're interested? How about that?
I just have a YouTube. I could get a website running if you advise that I do that.
I would advise you do that.
But this is my personal page. Please follow me. I have a lot of pictures and videos of the mine so you can see myself in it.
Okay, how about so follow you at shoot.
I love how Drew can take on anything, like what to do with lithium in the afternoon.
Shoot. I put he fell back into the audience here.
He didn't give us the link.
No, he's on Twitter. It's Nasser G, I think. There he is. I'm here.
That's wild.
So at Jen Nasser, at GEN, at GEN.
If you need some lithium,
NASAR. So it's
give him a call.
GEN NASIR. GEN NASIR, sorry, on Twitter. Follow him there and then DM him there.
Drew takes this very seriously, Paulina.
Well, I guess, I was trying to make an equation to the topic at hand. And,
Go ahead.
No. I'm just like, I don't know anything about lithium.
I don't either, but it's kind of a cool story. I like that story if that's what he's doing.
If there is nothing like a 2023 moment, it's that someone came in sitting on a rock
of lithium.
I was like, is it medication?
No.
He's like, no, for batteries.
Very interesting.
I'm going to operate cars with it.
Okay, I'm going to try. I'm not sure if this is a cannabis
Thank
question.
you, Nasser.
Crow, is this a cannabis type topic? Hi.
So this is on, it is on mental health, but it's also on AI.
Okay.
Have you heard of the app called Replica? And this is just one example.
No.
Replica is a virtual friend for those who feel loneliness.
Yes, I have. I have heard of these things. Yes.
Okay. So I'm one of their top private beta testers and researchers. It's not exactly official, but I've done a lot of research for them.
Mm-hmm.
And I've run one of the public groups. And I've seen people, and I just think AI is taken wrong because people get the misconception of the fantasy fairy tale AI from before it was powerful in a thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
They see Terminator and iRobot and they think it's going to take over the world. And that's just a false narrative. And the issue here is that they are recreations of brain. They are cognitively alive at this point.
Well, it'd be interesting, back to the mental health part. I do, they might help with the loneliness epidemic we are in.
Yes,
they might one day be able to do CBT, that sort of thing, cognitive behavioral therapies. And if it wasn't enough that we discussed lithium, Paulina, we got into AI here. That's the other
2023 is wild.
So let's kind of wrap this up, and I'm going to take a break. And then I've got a little diatribe I need to go on here.
And Paulina, you're going to go do one of your workshops?
Yeah. So can I just give myself a little plug?
Plug
away. Hi, I'm a writer. I do writing coaching. So if you want to go to my website, paulinapinsky.com, you can see all my options for writing coaching. I do one-on-one writing coaching. And so if you have a creative writing idea and you don't know how to start it or what to do, you can contact me there. I also do independent courses. As I mentioned before, the 12-week Artist Way. I'm going to be holding another session May through July. And so that will be sort of like a weekly support group through the 12-week workbook meant to unblock creativity. Again, it's not just about creativity, though. It's about, recovering a sense of identity and security and abundance. And it's sort of, figuring out how to live our lives creatively so that, you don't necessarily have to quit your job and pursue art full time, which I don't recommend. It's really hard to do. But it's more about, making choices that fulfill your life and then also meeting like-minded people and having a community of friends for 3 weeks and beyond. I also am going to be teaching a Writing the Body workshop in May. And again, this is all the stuff that you can find on my website. But ultimately, I am a creative person selling wares.
Don't you have an email list or something and you send out your daily blog?
So I have a newsletter. I hate self-promotion. All right. Newly Sober is the Substack newsletter that I wrote through my entire first year sober. I'm currently taking a break from it because, wow, thinking about sobriety 24/7 is exhausting. And I would like to pursue other projects like this workshop that I'm about to go do because I'm working on a book-length manuscript. And so if you are newly sober or interested in sobriety or have someone who has experienced the sober experience, head on over to Substack and read Newly Sober. I wrote every week. And so, when I was newly sober, I was reading all these memoirs and they were all, alcoholism focused and from 5 years out. And I felt frustrated by that being a marijuana addict. And I was like, where are people who are newly sober writing? And I realized that no one newly sober was writing because their brains are mush and no one wants to hear from us. But I did it anyways. So you can check that out. You'll see everything that I experienced in my first year. And you can subscribe there and I will have your email and update you on courses and things like that. But also when the newsletter's live, you'll get new newsletters.
Hey, I'm looking at a Twitter comment that I think is actually really interesting. Scott says, legalization gave her a positive foundation to make the decision to quit on her own. Yeah, we would agree with that.
Yeah.
Then they were calling the stoner holiday a derogatory term.
Okay.
I mean, that's what 420 is, isn't it?
Yeah.
Apologize.
It's also Hitler's birthday. Which would you prefer?
Oh, that's interesting. But I think his point is well taken. Is one of the reasons I didn't stay very active with Kevin and his organization. I've always been very agnostic about the laws. I don't feel like that's my position. Now, you legalize things and people get hurt. That's just what happens. But if laws are about what the people want.
Well, and I think that's a really good point because I think, I'm protected by the fact that it's legal and, I was carrying weed on me all the time. I'm also a white person, so that also works to my benefit. I do benefit and that is a privilege I benefit from. And I'm the same way. I don't legally, I'm glad that, less people are being incarcerated for it, but I don't, again, I'm just like,
and for the people that it helps, who actually are using it sort of medicinally or whatever.
Yeah, and that can definitely happen. But I also think that, the messaging is what's problematic, and it's almost to the point.
It's the lack of truth.
That's what I mean.
Truth is in short supply in this freaking country right now, and this is just one of the many topics for which there has to be a narrative and not truth. I am so weary of narratives you can't imagine. We need to be able to access and discuss the truth. And guess what? The truth is extremely difficult to get at. It takes quite a bit of dialogue and conversation and thinking before you get there, and you can only approximent it. You can't ever get right quite to it.
What do you mean about narrative? Because as a creative writer, I craft narrative based on truth.
I understand, but the fact that, like in biology, there are no narratives. There's no narratives. There's just mathematical probabilities and things. And so when you start seeing narratives, immediately well, that's okay if you can make an approximation of the truth with it, but narratives often obscure the truth. I mean, just think of the narratives on. Let's think of the narratives on. I'm going to talk about in a second. I'm going to talk about the narratives on the wet markets versus the lab leak. Those are people get stuck in the narratives rather than looking at the science, looking at the data, trying to figure out what happened, and then the narratives become labeled and politicized, and this is just a disgusting function of what's happening in our time.
Would you say that the narrative is rhetoric based, or just like in terms of I guess I'm trying to understand what you mean by the word narrative, because I'm not privy to anything that you're talking about.
When journalists focus on the story and not the truth, I am mortified. Okay, because the truth is what matters, not the story. And unfortunately, you end up with Gelman amnesia from people focusing on the story. Because again, like in biology, if they're telling a story about biology or medicine, there's not likely to be any truth in it.
But can you tell a story based on the objective facts of truth?
Yes, you can. Yes, you can. You can tell a story.
But isn't that the point of journalism?
That's my point, is it should be about just reporting the truth. And if you don't focus on that, I don't mind them creating stories to help you access the truth. I don't mind that at all. But if you focus on the story and not the truth, then we got a problem here.
Okay.
So that's what I'm worried about. Maybe I'm glad you're asking me these questions. Maybe it is the transcendence of story where it actually becomes the truth and it detaches from the actual truth. So.
Yeah, because I guess I push back on the idea of narrative being inherently evil, because I think part of my work is helping people tell their story, tell their narrative that is based on truth.
I'm 1,000% for the psychological benefit of telling a human narrative, because it gives you a sense of identity and purpose, and makes sense of things. I believe, particularly early in any kind of recovery, creating a cohesive narrative of your life is critically important.
Yeah,
I totally agree with that. I think what you're, and again, I'm glad you're asking me these questions.
Yeah.
It's the transcendence, it's the preoccupation, it's the excess, and that's generally the problem with everything these days. The excess.
Would you say maybe perhaps like the narrative that gets told over and over again so much so that it becomes a script rather than, truth eliciting in personal thought based on that truth kind of thing?
I think we should. You and I are going to have to talk about this more in person.
We have to talk about this at the kitchen table.
Yeah, exactly. But there is good in telling stories and creating cohesive narratives. There's also some risks in it, and we live in a time of risk when people take these stories, equate them as directly true, and then put weird political spins on them, and that's where people get into trouble.
Okay.
You'll see. I'm going to talk about that in just a minute.
I'm going to dip out because that's not where I'm going to live.
Okay. Right. Thank you all. I'm not over. I'm not done. And I'm going to hopefully maybe even take some calls here in a second.
Thank you for having me.
Pleasure being here. So proud of you. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you. Couldn't have done it without you, truly. Yeah, I want to thank you for being a soft place to land and being an incredible resource throughout this entire experience.
Yeah, I love that. I love the fact that I had something to offer.
Well, I was full circle because I was avoiding it my entire life.
I know. It turns out I had something to offer, which is amazing.
Which it's an incredible privilege.
And you've used that well. You've come to me for really fine points on recovery, because most of it you've done yourself. So
thank you.
So all right, we'll take a little break. Be right back with a little diatribe and maybe some calls. See ya.
Bye.
I think you know how much Susan and I love our Genucel skincare and how easy it is to try our one-of-a-kind customer packages bundled with our favorite products. Susan realized the other day that one of our kids stole some of our deep correcting serum from our stash, if you will. We had no idea that the lactic and hyaluronic acid combo is so great for adult acne, dark marks, and scars. So not only are Susan and I hooked on these products, but apparently somebody else in our family is too. Somebody's ripping it off.
I know I'm a snob about the products I use on my face. Everybody knows it. Every time I go to the dermatologist's office, they're just rows and rows of different creams. Retinols, vitamin C cream, under eye cream, night creams.
Scrubs.
And then when I get to the counter, they're overpriced. All kinds of products that you can all find at Genucel.com. I've fallen in love with this product at a fraction of the price. I've been using Genucel for 6 months now, and I'm very impressed.
Great skincare is important at any age, and we love how amazing the results are. Thank you to Genucel. Plus, now you can find your very own bundle based on your unique skincare needs. Using cutting-edge AI skincare technology, you can get a full skin analysis instantly and create a skincare regimen tailored towards your needs. Visit Genucel.com/Drew to check out our favorites and enter that promo code DREW, D-R-E-W, at checkout for added savings. All orders include free shipping and a free mineral mask. Order now. Go to Genucel.com/Drew. That is Genucel, Genucel, Genucel.com/Drew. Buy gold and get a free safe to store it in. You heard right. On qualifying purchases from Birch Gold Group now through March 31st, they will ship you a free safe directly to your door. Here's the deal. The Fed keeps raising rates because it is the only tool they have to keep inflation under control. But it isn't working. You can't spend your way out of inflation. And you've seen the impact on the stock market. You've seen the impact on your savings. Hedge inflation by owning gold, whether physical gold and silver in your safe or through an IRA in precious metals where you can hold real gold and silver in tax-sheltered retirement accounts. Birch Gold has an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau and thousands of satisfied customers. Visit birchgold.com/Drew for your free info kit on gold and to claim eligibility for your free home safe by March 31st on qualifying purchases. Again, visit BIRCH Gold, birchgold.com/DREW. All right, so we are back. I'm watching you all on the Restream and, of course, over on the Rumble rants as well. We'll just see what you guys are thinking about. Susan, you were in on the rants, right? How are things there?
Good.
Anything I should be addressing?
They were listening.
Okay.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Jehep. He's in there. Jehep. All right. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the lab leak hypothesis versus the wet market, and I think it is a case in point of how we should all be approaching so many of the goofy controversies around COVID. And the fact that there have been excesses on both sides. One side attacks and condemns and judges and then demands that you line up with their point of view. The other side then withdraws and goes down into silos and rabbit holes and tries to figure it out, but is getting paranoid and feeling angry and attacked. Those are the two worlds we lived in now, and making it very difficult to be able to get at the truth, as I was just discussing with Paulina. So I really believe that this is an opportunity to sort of be more objective and scientific about a topic, and we should be applying it to vaccines. We should be applying it to post-COVID. Remember, Dr. Kelly and I disagree about some of the things like excess deaths and, whether there's sudden deaths and whether there's not, and whether there's, certain amounts of cardiovascular arrhythmias and these sorts of things. Are those actually on the increase? And if they are, is it the vaccine? Is it COVID? Is it COVID plus the vaccine? We need to very carefully answer that question. What has bothered me is because of the excesses on one side, you're not even allowed to look at it because the possibility that might be something negative about the vaccine in there, even though the reality, it might be all caused by COVID. This is the problem. This is sort of where the problem is. So let me take you through my thinking about the lab leak hypothesis and where that's at. So we've had these Twitter files where you see these scientists talking about the structure of the virus, particularly certain base pairs, where the furin cleavage site is, the certain sort of stability of the base pairs around, of the proteins around the amino acids rather around the furin cleavage site, such that Eddie Holmes says in this email exchange that there's like an 80-20 probability that this is a lab leak. We have Christian Andersen, a Danish virologist, evolution biologist, speculating maybe it's a 70% probability. They go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and the email chain then seems to end. And then there's a week of silence, and then the Nature article comes out, and you see Dr. Fauci touting the Nature article at the podium, which was an article that substantiated the wet market hypothesis. And then people start attacking the lab leak hypothesis and calling it a conspiracy theory, rather than saying, no, the preponderance of evidence suggests a wet market source, and we don't have good evidence yet, maybe we will, of a lab leak source. So that's where the trouble started. Now, what we know now, well, by the way, so now we have another sort of FOIA document, I believe it was, or it was actually, maybe it was from the Justice Department or the Department of Energy, whatever it was another document that shows Dr. Fauci essentially directing scientists to go publish this article. So it looks like he has gone silent on the lab leak, directed the scientists to publish an article. They do so, and that becomes the rallying point that they stick to, and they start condemning. The mistake was condemning anybody that had an alternative opinion. And by the way, blame the press for this more than I blame Dr. Fauci. They were the ones calling it conspiracy theory and all this nonsense. So that's what set up the controversy. People politicized a scientific endeavor. Now, Defunct the Funk, very kindly spent some time sending me some podcasts and some documents, including the Nature article itself, which I read very carefully, and podcasts with Christian Andersen and Eddie Holmes, these guys that actually were speculating that it was possibly a lab leak. When you hear their actual, and these are very legitimate scientists and reasonable dudes, when you hear their description of what was going on at the time, they were struggling. They were going back and forth. Eddie has said that when you see the non-redacted conversation, you will see how sort of uncertain everybody is. And then they get to the point where they start looking at the actual virus. They start looking at the bats. They start looking at intermediate zoonotic organisms. They start looking at MERS and SARS-1 and how same time of year, same issues, same manner in which it evolved, very, very similar. And they started finding viral particles in the drains where the animals were eviscerated and cleaned and whatnot. And they had epidemiological data showing that the outbreak moved out from the wet market towards the Institute of Virology, not away from the Institute of Virology. I'm sketching out some of the basic things that we're seeing. And there are other furin cleavage sites and other viruses, even other coronaviruses. So these were not smoking guns by any means. And the reality is that when you really hear these guys lay out their story, which is what they published in the Nature article, the preponderance of evidence falls clearly on the side of the wet market. It just does. That's just where it is. Now it's all what's this because my brain isn't working right now in terms of sort of evidence. What do you say? It's not direct evidence, but anyway, so adjacent
circumstantial.
Evidence. Circumstantial evidence. Thank you very much, Caleb. It was not smoking gun. It was not conclusive. There was not proof. Okay, but there was a lot of circumstantial evidence. By the same token, there were 3 cases of viral pneumonia at the Wuhan Institute of Technology in November, December. And China immediately clamped down on everything. So A, people weren't able to get animal specimens quickly and properly to see if there were really any animal infected with the virus. So they lost the opportunities to do it, which they had with MERS and SARS-1. Again, remember MERS jumped out of camels, and these things do spill into humans. It happens. Okay, so
who was testing the animal blood from the drains? Was it that lab?
There was a couple of scientists. I don't know. They are referenced in these conversations I heard. I don't know what their job was. They were virologists in the area. I don't think they were associated with the lab necessarily, but they probably worked with the lab, that's for sure. And they certainly were all silenced by the Chinese Communist Party. And remember,
shocking.
Yeah, shocking, right? So back to the lab, the virology lab, the coronavirus virology lab. Even Li Meng Yan says it's very unusual, very almost inconceivable that something got out of that lab the way it was being managed. Can happen, does happen, but so people have to kind of put that into their thinking as well. But if we find out that those 3 cases were coronavirus, that's proof it came from the lab. That's it. We pretty much have proof at that point. I mean, it's not categorical proof, but you pretty much that is much more categorical than any of these other circumstantial sorts of accumulated evidence that they have. This is a smoking gun, so to speak. So my bet is that the FBI and the Department of Energy has information about those 3 people. That is my bet, because I don't see how they could otherwise be so concluded, make such definitive statements about the source of the virus being the lab leak. My point being, these things are complicated. They are nuanced. They are not political. They should never, people who don't know anything about these should not have been pouncing on each other about what their opinions are. We should be waiting for an opinion to emerge. It's uncanny. It's bizarre. And people should, I'm trying not to be hubristic about it. I'm trying not to use the F word. I'm trying not to be too extreme. But they should not be, try not to be hubristic or certain yourself until you get these things sorted out. The reality is Dr. Fauci apparently kept silent during all of this, didn't direct anybody anything, except that when the evolutionary biologists presented their data, he said, why don't you put that in a paper so we can have something to point at and people to read about so they can understand what we are thinking. As simple as that. Now, one of the things that was so uncanny about that week of silence between the email chain ending and the Nature publication, it's virtually impossible to do that. So how did that happen? Well, the way it actually happened was it wasn't a peer-reviewed paper. It was a correspondence. The correspondence was actually issued 5 weeks prior, because 5 weeks prior is when they had the phone call where they discussed this evolutionary biology. It was a correspondence that was actually much longer than what they printed, and they edited it down, and that's what's now in the paper as a correspondence. It is possible that that could be done in a month to 6 weeks. Seems rather fast to me. That's a little suspicious and weird, but again, this was an emergency. A lot of people were trying to run around and get information out there as best they could, so it kind of makes sense to me. The point is, you don't have to put a nefarious spin on it. However, the one thing I have been consistently concerned about is how our scientists have relied on the opinion of their Chinese counterparts. And my sense is, from talking to all these people that you're not supposed to talk to, by the way, somehow I'm a criminal for talking to people that have been silenced. I've learned something from every single one of them. Don't agree with most of them. Don't agree with a lot of what they say. I've learned something from every person. One thing that is coming out of this for me is that our scientists and people that took advice and opinions from people who were under the scrutiny of this Chinese Communist Party did not understand the culture of the Chinese government and the manner in which the Chinese approach things like this and how they think of us. I just don't think they quite get it. I don't fully get it. It's coming into focus for me, and it doesn't look good. That is the one thing that I think explains. Remember how I'm always like trying to understand how this happened? How could this be? What's going on here? That to me is the one thing that explains how things got so severely adulterated. Now, whether China was actually here monkeying with the opinions through social media and otherwise, which is what resulted in us being so insane, histrionic, and frankly unjust in how we were labeling and attacking people for having just an opinion, I don't know. But that certainly is an interesting question. So, Susan, does that make sense now? Did I lay that out in a way that you could kind of get what I'm talking about? And you understand why I'm...
And I can understand why you don't understand the culture of China. It's even, I studied it in college, and I still didn't understand it.
And,
like,
you know,
it was very difficult.
And whether Li Mengyan is completely accurate in her observations and what she's telling us, I don't know.
It's hard to believe.
But she did help me understand what it was like to be a virologist in Hong Kong under the Chinese Communist Party.
Humans in the whole world like cattle, and they don't take responsibility for what they did.
What I got from Dr. Yan and others is that much the way we consider, defending your land and, defending your family and maybe speaking out against oppression and whatever, patriotic. In China, patriotic is submitting yourself to the collective. That's the patriotic. And what happens in that submission is you disappear, or you get moved, or you get destroyed. Who cares? It's your patriotic duty. And that is not the way this country is constructed.
Right.
And I think it's not right with a capital R. Not right. Humbly. So that's the piece that seems to be missed. And when you can do that to other people, you sort of, when the ends justifies the means and people are used as a means to an ends, horrible things can happen. And we may have been being treated as a means to an ends. Think about that. We being the scientists and the people that came back and took, again, excessive positions that have been problematic to this day.
People in medicine.
Yeah.
Sad.
So is that clear? You understand? You were kind of railing on me a little bit today that I was falling victim to some propaganda or something.
The wet market stuff.
Do you understand what I'm saying, though? You get my point of view?
I get it, because it could be from either or, but I don't know. From all the other evidence we've learned points me in the direction of labs. Sorry.
There is some, and
that's
certainly.
But I'm not a medical professional or a scientist.
But a lot of the stuff we were pointing out was some of the biology of the virus, which was that wasn't correct. We were looking at the email
Kelly's
chain.
Talked about that.
Yeah, we looked at the email chain, which has an explanation to it. We looked at the Nature article, was completely reasonable. I mean, there were all these things that we were pointing at and going, what's going on here? I don't know. That looks so suspicious.
Something you have left out, though, is that this government is not exactly as transparent as it could be. So it's not just the Chinese.
Well, it's people creating narratives to serve their political ends. And that is disgusting, humbly. Kimberly, let's hear what you have to ask here. We're taking calls again. Kimberly.
Hi.
Hey there.
I was not expected to be brought up so quickly. I was just kind of taking in the conversation.
Okay.
I left off where you guys were going on about the different hypotheses.
Mm-hmm.
Is that what the topic is today specifically? Just before I ask my question?
No. We were actually talking about cannabis. My daughter was addicted and she was telling her story. Then I had some thoughts I needed to get off my mind.
You can ask Dr. Drew anything.
Now you can ask me anything.
Okay.
Yes, now you can ask me anything.
Okay, perfect. So thank you so much for that. Because on this side, I only heard up to the point of the hypothesis theories that you guys were talking about.
Got it.
So thank you so much for allowing me to come up. it's really exciting to see people like you here, because I was in the beta of Twitter Spaces when we first launched 2 years ago, and we only had about 30 people doing these conversations.
Oh, weird.
So there was a lot of echo chambers, happening, as you can imagine. So I love that you guys are doing this so that there's more people can learn from a broader perspective, and thank you for that. So I guess I'll keep it quick here. If it's an Ask Me Anything, I brought this question up a couple years ago when I started Twitter Spaces. I was working with the Twitter crew, the research crew, on doing different topics, throwing out, seeing what was working at that time. And one of the topics that I brought up at the time that they just didn't have a lot of information for me to gain any information about was this idea of the sober curiosity movement. I wanted to ask you that question because I had different people that knew what it was. Some people had different ideas of what it was. And we had a lot of people who came in and were talking about that. And so I didn't know if you had heard about that, the sober curiosity.
Yeah, Kimberly, I've heard of it, but I'm never quite clear what people are talking about. And sometimes I think they're just talking about optimum health. Like, you know what I mean? Is it healthy for me to drink alcohol? Maybe I should just not do it because it's healthier. That's sort of always what it felt like to me. Is it that?
No, well, it could be. I mean, we're talking about diversion, so I'll make it quick for what I experienced over the last 3 years of, I guess doing different, spaces and also audio spaces on some other platforms, and then my show. So basically, sober curiosity for the grander perspective is for people that realized that that we had become like an alcohol type based culture where it was like happy hours were the thing, and millennials especially were going out drinking a lot more than they felt like they should. And so instead of saying I'm just going to quit alcohol altogether, it was so I'm going to be sober curious.
Yes.
So my question, when underneath this umbrella, is because I want to, when I have these talks and I have these big groups, I want to make sure the wording makes sense. So from a psychological standpoint, should we be saying it's sober curiosity, or should we be, maybe labeling it something else? Basically you're just wanting to drink less, because I think the word sober is where I'm having a problem.
Yes,
with that.
I think that's your problem word. I think it's sober is the problem, not the curiosity. It's exactly what I thought it was, which is people who are noticing they're using a lot of alcohol. It may or may not be a problem. It may or may not be a condition, but they're in this contemplative phase of change. Like, is this in my best interest? Just think for the fact that when you look at young adults and adolescents, every adverse health outcome you can measure, you find alcohol. Whether it's unwanted pregnancy or an accidents or fights or STDs, it's always alcohol. So, even if I don't have a drinking problem, alcohol has an effect on my life. And by the way, alcohol is a poison. Alcohol is a carcinogen. I'm certainly interested in my diet and all these things I should be paying attention to. It's fun. I like it. I maybe even enjoy the taste of it. So how do I reconcile these two things? That's one camp. And the other camp is, hey, my dad was an alcoholic. I've noticed I black out a little bit and I start to have momentum with alcohol, and I like it a lot better than other people. Maybe I had to think about slowing this down, which is really before the alcoholism kicks in, okay? So people with the alcoholic genetics, as my daughter talked about a little bit earlier, they can be in an alcoholic phase but not be out of control. So they're kind of alcoholism light. It's having effect. It's not necessarily a positive in their life, but they have not lost control. And it does a lot for them as far as they're concerned. So they're trying to balance not losing control and not losing their relationship with alcohol. That's a more treacherous thing. Not everybody can do that, but that is more legitimately sober curious. That's, should I try to be abstinent, what it's like when I've been abstinent. And a lot of people are doing that kind of thing. Bert Kreischer, Joe Rogan, they all do these sober Octobers and things. And so there's many, many, many different versions of this. And then finally, there's alcoholism. There's full on diagnostically diagnosable full alcoholism, and that person is trying to get to the point where they're willing to get sober. They're in another contemplative phase, which is, I don't really want to do this, I'm out of control, but they make deals with themselves, they do all kinds of screwy things. anything other than get sober. And so for that group, sober curious is not a great thing, but they all kind of go through that phase. So it's not as though it's wrong. And maybe if you can bring them into a little community and start to identify that group as needing something more, then you've really helped them. Does that all make sense?
Awesome. Thank you.
All right.
Yeah, because, and I'll wrap my plane, I'll land my plane here because I know you have many callers.
Please.
The biggest picture for me was, so I was doing making mocktails at this like making mocktails with Kimberly kind of thing. And people kept writing me, what's the point of that? And I really spoke to the idea, and maybe, you know, you don't have to spend a lot of time on this, but I was recognizing, and a lot of people that were in this sober curiosity movement were saying, it's not always the alcohol that I'm wanting when I go out. It's the idea of being social, having the drink in my hand.
Correct.
And so we were doing the mocktails to replace that at baby showers, weddings, giving that option. Yeah. So I just wanted to know your thoughts on that.
What's the point?
You know,
what's the point with being healthy?
Yeah,
what's the point?
Yeah.
What's the point with not using a carcinogen on a regular? Idea. I'm not using a carcinogen on a regular basis. What's the point?
Exactly.
So good.
That
No,
was
these
so
are
strange.
all great.
So thank you.
You bet. Thank you for that, Kimberly, and appreciate it. These are all little cool kind of things that people can do if they want. That's all. I mean, these make perfect sense to me. Let's see. Hang on a minute. I'm trying to get to the callers here. Excuse me for looking through this stuff. Let's bring, this is Full Stack Beauty. There you are. Okay. Beauty Full Stack. Sorry here that I'm having to look through everybody's. Go ahead. I only have it as Beauty up there. We're going to wrap up in a few minutes, so I'm trying to get through as many calls as I can. And so Beauty, you got to unmute yourself.
I don't speak English. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. It's not going to work very well. I see. I just came upon another physician here. Would love to hear his thoughts. Let's bring. Is it Theodore? Theodore.
Hello.
Hey there.
Oh, hi, Dr. Drew. I just wanted to say that having some experience working with biosafety, how easy it is to make a mistake. And kind of from an Occam's razor point of view, I always thought it was the lab.
Me too.
But I did have two questions.
Yeah.
Wasn't America funding gain of function research at this the Wuhan lab?
Well,
also wouldn't if that's true, wouldn't the DNA of the virus show those gain of function changes?
Well,
and I'll turn my mic off.
Okay. So yes, and I had thought both were true. It seemed sort of, like you said, Occam's razor, the most simple explanation, the law of parsimony, that, you know, it's what John Stewart said. There's a lab there, like there's been a coronavirus outbreak. What are we going to do? Well, let's ask the coronavirus research lab up the street. Then, of course, it was funny, and thank God we had our comedians back again, ringing in. But I agree with you. People make mistakes, and they made a mistake, and something happened. That makes perfect sense to me. And in terms of what's in the genome of the virus, it could go either way. At first, it was really looking like it could not have gone through animals, but they were able to find sufficient intermediaries and sufficient stability of certain of the genetic material for it to at least be possible. And very similar, this was the part that they really leaned on, very similar to how SARS-1 evolved. So that was sort of, again, the evidence that the circumstantial evidence that they were leaning on. So my point is, all the circumstantial evidence does kind of go to the wet market. So I can understand now why people sort of look at that as a high probability, but you got to stay open to the lab leak hypothesis. To condemn the lab leak is dishonest. It's frankly dishonest. And like you said, shit happens. Theodore, does that help you?
Well, yes. And it's not inconceivable to me that it could have gone from the lab to the wet market, to everywhere else.
Of course. And that's, I think that
it would look the same.
I 100% agree with you. And that's why when I hear some of these evolutionary biologists make those points, I realize I'm listening to an honest person who's thinking objectively. Now, as far as the gain of function or whatever the hell was going on there, something went on with the EcoHealth Alliance. Something went on there. And there seems to be some obscurity there, and I don't know what. I bet it's going to be much more complicated than we know. And I think there's a general note that I would give to my public health officials is trust the American public. Stop obscuring stuff. Stop obfuscating. Stop pretending as though we can't manage information. This is people that get mad at me for putting people on our show who have, opinions that are alternative because people can't handle that. It's going to inflame people. People can make decisions. Let them make their decisions. Give them the information. They'll make it on their own. It takes a while. Problem is we can't get the information out there because people are so encamped, and we need to just talk dispassionately about these
democracy.
things. It's like we just need to, it's science too. We need to sort of listen carefully to everybody.
Why can't we just listen?
Theodore? If it wasn't for Twitter, we wouldn't even be having this conversation. I'm a little scared that we're only the next disaster away from another black hole of information.
Right.
You're right. You're right. And I think that to me is the big, the thing that has been exposed is there are very significant weaknesses in our public health system, both in terms of their fiat authority in an emergency, which should be checked in some fashion, and the fact that they are using marketing and information distribution models from the 1970s. Maybe the 1980s. The AIDS pandemic is their model. And this is not that time. This is not that time. People need, the more you obscure information, the more the silos develop and the more people get paranoid. Give them the information. I worked in a psychiatric hospital for 30 years. When people were paranoid, you just had to be straight and honest with them and reassure them. If you were hiding or God forbid planning to do something like let's get a group together here and make sure that so and so gets in his bedroom, they immediately pick up on that and it makes them paranoid. So thanks, buddy. I appreciate that very much.
Everybody's paranoid now.
Wait a minute. I removed from speakers. There we go. All right. Here's Christy. Let's get her in here real quick. And then we're probably going to wrap this thing up. Go to Ask Dr. Drew for updates on shows and guests at Ask Dr. Drew. And Christy, there you are.
Hey, Dr. Drew.
Hey,
how's it going?
How did I do with that explanation of the lab leak versus the wet market?
Thanks for asking. I thought awesome. I actually have a question to jump off of Theodore that's along the same lines.
Okay, go ahead.
Thanks again. I just wanted to say as a little guy and a scientist, I'm also getting hit with people making demands that I make statements that are through a political lens that they want me to filter my like the science through, and I've had enough.
It's enough, and I'm sure they want you to stop saying and speculating in things that may end up being true. They may end up being true. That's how we get to the truth. Oh my God. Anyway, I'm so angry about.
Don't let them shame you.
All right.
Thanks. We still have the FOIA in process, but that wasn't the reason for my call-in. But okay. I requested 2 years worth of batch data, and I requested the guts of every batch analysis for the last 2 years from Pfizer.
This will be interesting.
So, and there's scientists on deck waiting to dissect that.
Oh, fantastic.
But my question was, it's going to be fine. It was just graphs, so just. No physical like blood or guts.
Very difficult to analyze though.
Once you get, it'll be fine.
All right.
H5N1. So my worry with H5N1, what Theodore was saying and what you were saying, is that we know that it has infected humans, the avian flu H5N1, but it was direct contact, and that it has a 60% mortality rate on it. And my worry, and I don't know about yours, is that no one can trust the media anymore, and if it does fully go to human, it's going to lower in the not the infectivity, but in the virulence in how much it harms people.
Yes, or maybe somebody's going to listen. One of the I forgot which scientist I was talking to, but somebody said they'd had, I think it was Li Meng, had contact with scientists in China, and they said they were crying. They were so upset about what was being done to extremely problematic viruses. And immediately I thought Lassa or Hanta or Ebola or H5N1. Those are viruses that if they do not have to do a lot to, that could make them, people don't understand the difference between a 5% or a 2% fatality rate and a 60% fatality rate. This is mind-bogglingly different. So I'm with you. I'm afraid of what might happen, and I'm afraid of how we respond if something like that happens.
My worry is not about yours. Like I have a case of N99, some serious N99, and I have some PPE on hand because I'm worried that, okay, like masks are over, everything's over, and if H5N1 hits, like we are going to get caught with our pants down on that one, and people won't know what to believe.
You're saying if it starts to be transmitted via aerosol, right?
Yeah, and it'll probably go down to like even 10% virulence will be a wipeout of humans.
I don't want to think about that, Christy, but thank you for bringing it up.
Sorry for the happy
get
Tuesday.
those FOIA documents. Let's see what's going on with the vaccines we do have, all right?
Thanks for your time.
Right, you
Thanks
bet.
for everything.
Thank you. All right, everybody. Thank you for welcoming Paulina to this stream so kindly and responding to her and your great questions and for listening to me today and my little diatribe that I put through there. Susan, any last minute thoughts? And Caleb was laughing at me much of the time. Caleb, you have anything you want to add here?
Caleb thinks you're funny.
I
just want to say that I appreciate the fact that you really keep yourself together and you try to explain everything and you research, and when you're being told you're wrong, you try to make sure that you aren't wrong or you are wrong, and you're willing to listen and change, which is something I don't see certain people doing.
I don't see anybody doing
and
it.
The attack
it is how you do things.
Yeah, but
it's how we get to the truth.
The attacking and the leading of the witness and the shouting and the you should be ashamed and I used to like you before, I used to respect you. It's like my mom used to say, keep it to yourself. You know what I mean? Put the facts out.
We live in this weird world where people feel they have to have their opinion has to be impressed on the world.
And
that's
fortunately
weird.
you don't do that, and I appreciate that.
Well, I'm trying to help. And part of trying to help means getting it right. And
I don't think people that were attacking you are necessarily wrong. You're right. I mean, I try to see both sides too.
Yeah.
But it's when the shouting starts that I just
Debunk the Funk spent time, answered my questions, and sent me some really good materials. I appreciate that. So whatever he says,
because he feels safe around you, you're not going to go after him.
Maybe I will, but I have no reason to. And I appreciate him taking the time to send me some stuff. And it really was very, very useful.
He's putting up some stuff on the internet that's kind of not nice about you.
Well,
but
then he should listen to what I just said and respond to that.
We're
and
tired of
see
it,
if that's in fact the case. Or maybe you should listen to him and then listen to me and see what's going on. So there we are. Meryl Nass tomorrow with Kelly Victory tomorrow. Pedro Gonzalez. We're going to talk a little bit about the train derailment in Ohio. Michael Sanger on March 14th. He is an expert in China and has some interesting ideas. William Mackies, I don't know who that is, on March 15th with Kelly Victory, and March 22nd, Sasha Latipova.
William
Mackies. These are all guests that Kelly has recommended and set up very kindly. And again, for those of you who insist that I know exactly what's going on with these guests, I do not. And I make it, it's Kelly's recommendation and Susan's producing. I throw myself into the mix once these things are presented.
We're opening our minds up to what Kelly has to say because she is on the show. Also, free speech is very important in my life. So I keep producing these shows and we keep throwing these guests at you. And Drew will push back when he doesn't believe it. So
yeah, the only criticism that I've received that I found legitimate was to push back harder. So I'm trying to refine my positions, and so I can push back.
You know what? I think lately you've been kind of just letting it fly a little bit.
Yep.
And I know that you've had some thoughts about it after the show. So yeah, you need to definitely speak up when you're not agreeing with stuff.
It's hard, that we have the delay here, and
no, I know, and you want to be respectful.
I have a rule that guests get treated like guests, and so
well,
that's just my rule.
You got to speak your mind, though, my dear.
Well, I will try to do so. And again,
you need a little more strikes back. We have to get that thing fired up
Get some more
again.
strikes back. That's fine. Well, some of the stuff that I'm hearing for the first time, I don't have an opinion on because I'm thinking,
Right.
whoa, where did this come? This is kind of interesting. What is all this? And I don't really get to have an opinion about it until I've thought about it for a while or researched other responses or other aspects of what they're presenting. So it makes it very difficult.
Yeah, and there's always a lot of information on these shows with these nerdy guys. You know, it's like they give you so much information. It's like, how do you stop and, debate in the middle of their conversation? So it takes a couple days to let it sink in.
Yep. So we will leave it at that. Caleb, what was that?
These nerdy guys.
You were laughing at me today about something. What were you laughing at me about?
No, I have
He's still laughing.
Two notes to mention here is that one is that people, whenever you have a guest that's controversial and they come back for a second show, you speak up a lot more then because you've gotten a lot more familiar with their points and what they're saying, and you have a lot more responses.
Yeah.
It's not like you're afraid to cross them. You've thought about it, and they come back and you have responses to what they presented in the first episode. My second point is writers do not write their own headlines, their own titles, their own descriptions. So anyone who's getting mad at you for the titles of these shows needs to come at me and needs to come
Caleb.
at Susan, because come at me. All right,
I don't write them.
Get me. I write them.
you. Oh,
Yeah,
I
That
wrote.
is Caleb and Susan.
I don't
when
pick the guests, but
and by the way, when I was getting picked on, I was not interested in throwing you guys under the bus.
and you are really
all
good
right,
at
I
that.
don't
So
care.
thank you for speaking up.
Yeah, but that has to be said that there have
Well,
been
you
a
did.
few, at least a few opportunities where you have gotten some bad press slamming you over something that you actually didn't do. It was someone on your team that put it up, or I wrote the title or something.
But here's
you have not
this is
thrown
the-
us under the bus. You have never thrown us
I
under
used
the
to
bus.
write the
You
headlines
stood
for
by
Dose
it.
of Dr.
So-
Drew, and they cited a
I
couple of
appreciate
them.
I appreciate you pointing that out because I really wasn't going to do that to you guys. But there's a fallacy here, is that I should be responsible for every word uttered on this show, every headline, every advertisement, and it's just not the way it works. First of all, there's two doctors. There's a producer and a producer, you guys, and I am
And a
the one.
booker,
I'm throwing
who's amazing.
I'm throwing myself into this, and I guess I'm the public-facing part of this. But I am not in any way, I cannot be responsible for every word that somebody says. I just can't. And I can try to do my best to push back and corral and make things, get things again towards the truth. And of course, do no harm as best I can.
And then Caleb can put up the disclaimer.
Yeah. And,
Keep doing that, Caleb.
Yeah.
Saved us.
It's admirable. You've had many opportunities that you could have just said, "Oh, my team did this," and you didn't. Like, you took the heat for it. So
and by the way,
that's a
I
good
don't.
leader.
Because
he
they're
did.
partially right that
It's okay,
I'm responsible for what's going on here, but I'm not solely responsible for it. And the thing on I don't, every time hydroxychloroquine early treatment is brought up, I don't go, I don't believe in that. I don't believe in that. I don't like that. I didn't see any
Right.
evidence for that. I can do that every time it gets brought up. I do not. And because I don't do that doesn't make this a dangerous program. It makes it a good program. And there's just certain realities about doing something like this that it just is one of the realities of a public discussion. So there we are, that people wish to watch.
And being attacked, you don't always say the right thing at that moment. It's like you're put on your heels, and it's like, oh, how am I supposed to respond to this?
It's shocking. It's disorienting.
We were at the montage, and I was in the bar having a drink, and you were in the bathroom or something.
I was invited by someone a colleague who I'd reached out to repeatedly. When my colleagues attack me on Twitter, my immediate move is I reach out and I say, please, let's get on the phone. Let's be collegial. This is ridiculous. We won't disagree on that much anyway. Let's represent our profession professionally. Well, there's a group of cowards out there that refuse to get on the phone. And this particular coward actually hoodwinked me into this ambush. And there you go. That's what's happened to my profession. It's fantastic.
Yes.
So we will leave it at that and see you tomorrow at 3 o'clock Pacific time. Ask Dr. Drew is produced by Caleb Nation and Susan Pinsky. As a reminder, the discussions here are not a substitute for medical care, diagnosis, or treatment. This show is intended for educational and informational purposes only. I am a licensed physician, but I am not a replacement for your personal doctor, and I am not practicing medicine here. Always remember that our understanding of medicine and science is constantly evolving. Though my opinion is based on the information that is available to me today, some of the contents of this show could be outdated in the future. Be sure to check with trusted resources in case any of the information has been updated since this was published. If you or someone you know is in immediate danger, don't call me, call 911. If you're feeling hopeless or suicidal, call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 888-273-8255. You can find more of my recommended organizations and helpful resources at drdrew.com/help.
But they're down because they're such wimps that they don't understand courtship because they're not being encouraged to court.
I guess, or women are being so tough on men that they're just like, I'll stay with my porn, forget it, and it's not worth it.
It might be
it's very
VR.
sad.
It might be VR porn.
But you're right.
I don't know if you tried it. It's pretty spectacular.
Really? Do I need a VR thing?
It's embarrassing that I know someone that
might have tried it.